and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to yet another incredible installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Northern Command Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. I have to tell you, I don't know what it is about Thursdays, but I always get kind of excited. Maybe it's because you just got one more day to go before the weekend, but it's a great day in the Cowboy State regardless. Unfortunately, however, we've got to begin on kind of a sad note. Bobby Barrasso, the wife of Senator John Barrasso, has finally passed away. She's been fighting a long battle with cancer, and our thoughts and our prayers go out to Senator Barrasso. He released a statement this morning, and I'll quote it to you. After a courageous battle with cancer, Bobby is now at peace and at home with the Lord. In addition to being a devoted wife and mother, Bobby was a leader, a fierce advocate for Wyoming, and a friend to everyone she met. We miss her dearly. On behalf of our entire family, we thank everyone for your prayers and continued support as we remember her and grieve together. My prayers are with you, Senator Barrasso. We don't always see eye to eye on very many things at all, but we all loved Bobby, and we're very, very sorry for your loss. So if you get a minute today, just take a few moments and say a little prayer for John Barrasso and his family. We're truly sorry, Senator. So for the rest of the program, I got to kind of warn you ahead of time. I'm juggling a number of things this morning, and I'm waiting on a phone call. And unfortunately, I have no idea when it's going to come in. I've just got to keep my options open a little bit. Apparently, United States senators do not work on my schedule, though they absolutely should. So just be aware that if at some time during the program I got to take a quick break, we'll probably listen to, let's see what I got on tap on the board here. We'll listen to a little Eric Clapton while I take that phone call. But if it's all of a sudden I got to take a break, then you know what's happening. But we begin this morning with the Pravda on the Platte. It's not that often anymore that I begin with something from the Red Star Pravda on the Platte, because they're kind of irrelevant now. But they have a page on the very front, top center stage on their website that I just can't ignore, and neither should you. I'm not saying that you should run out and grab a copy of the Pravda, if you can find one. Their distribution has dropped so low that sometimes it's a little bit hard to find the old Casper Star Tribune, which is a sad commentary on the state of establishment news media. The Casper Star Tribune used to be the paper of record, and they still claim to be, though it is very, very rare that they even run a story that's even remotely related to the state of Wyoming. It is without a doubt, the leading liberal page in Wyoming politics and in Wyoming. It's not even published. I mean, not even ran by a Wyoming company. It's owned by Lee Enterprises, which is a Virginia-based newspaper conglomerate. It's not even printed in the Cowboy State. It's printed in Nebraska. And it's just, they have that little tiny former liquor store in Casper, and the Casper Star is now a very, very small shadow of what it once was. However, on occasion, they successfully get my hackles up, my hair to stand on end, and sometimes my head starts to explode. We're not at the exploding head part this morning. I am, however, definitely irritated. From the Pravda, an article entitled "Closed Primaries Shut Out Millions of Voters and Divide Americans into Warring Camps." First of all, what is a closed primary? Well, actually, we should begin with what is a primary election. A primary election is one that selects a party's candidate for the general election. Just about in every other state, except for Wyoming, the parties run their primaries kind of independently. In Wyoming, the legislature decided to get involved in the party primary. And, to some extent, it is kind of run by the legislature. It's a ridiculous situation. But the point of a primary is to narrow the field down to one or possibly two candidates. There are lots of races in Wyoming that you have to go through the primary election. For example, municipal races. Municipal races are nonpartisan, and there's oftentimes a large number of candidates that run for offices like city council and mayor and those things. So in the primary, after the primary, the field is whittled down to twice the number of seats open. So, for example, if you're running for city council and there are 2 seats open on the council, that would allow 4 people through the primary election gate. Now, in Wyoming, the primary election is the most important one because we are a supermajority Republican state, though our legislature doesn't act like it. So, really, there are very few races that even have any significance in the general election. But the Pravda is now claiming, and I guess I should explain what exactly a closed primary is, because now we have to define them. Some states have what they call open primaries, which means that even if you are not a Republican, you can vote in them, which is absolutely ridiculous. Primary elections are to select the party's candidate for that office, not everybody else. So it's absolutely bizarre that you would allow Democrats and independents and libertarians to vote in the Republican primary. They have their own deal. They can have their caucus, and that's another fascinating thing about Wyoming law is it's only the major parties that have to abide by by the primary setup that the legislature decided on. It's absolutely ridiculous. None of the other parties have to abide by that. The Libertarian Party or the Communist Party USA or whatever, they can play by their own rules. So it's only the Democrat and Republican primary. So it kind of begs the question, why, if you are a Democrat, why would you vote in a Republican primary? You don't like any of those candidates anyway, so the only reason that you would do that is to select the most liberal candidate of that party. So that covers what primary elections are. They are elections for the party, the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, to select their candidate for the general election. So then, what would be closed primaries? A closed primary is exactly what a primary election should be. That only Republicans vote in a Republican primary election. This all seems so simple that a kindergartner could pick this up. But apparently, the Pravda on the Platte and every Democrat in the state of Wyoming can't figure this out. You know why Democrats want to vote in Republican primaries? Because they don't have a suitable candidate of their own, one that can actually beat any Republican in the state. Anyway, I digress. As you can tell, this article kind of got me a little irritated this morning. So a closed primary would be one in which only those parties' members can vote, which is kind of the point of a primary election. But let's get to the article, and I quote, let's see here. They go through this long diatribe of this story of this poor guy who walked into a polling location and couldn't vote because he wasn't a member of that party. Go figure. Let's see here. Here we go. Millions of voters in states like Oklahoma with primaries that are at least partially closed are shut out from voting in contested races because of their independent status or party affiliation, denying participation in elections their taxpayers fund. But it's a Republican or Democrat primary. And if you are not a member of that party, you don't need to be voting in it because you have no horse, literally no horse in the race. In some cases, those primaries decide who wins the seat outright. Across 9 closed or partially closed primary states, about 2 in 5 registered voters in districts with contested U.S. congressional primary elections in the 2022 midterms were barred from casting ballots in those races because they're not a member of that party. According to a Lee Enterprises public service journalism team analysis of publicly available data. Lee Enterprises is the company that owns the Pravda on the Platte, by the way. It continues. The 2024 election season has officially begun, and voters are heading out to the polls and casting their votes for who they think deserves the party's nomination in primary elections. But in states with closed primaries, voters find themselves not being able to vote for a candidate they want or being excluded from voting entirely. None of that is even remotely true. If you are a member of the Democrat Party, you're not excused from, or you're not excluded from your primary election. It's your primary election, not the Republican one. You're absolutely able to vote in that party's primary, and you're able to vote in the general election. It's not my fault if you're dumb enough to register as a Democrat in the state of Wyoming, and most of the candidates are Republicans. That's your choosing, not anybody else's. It continues. Similarly, about 2 in 5 registered voters throughout those 9 states in districts with contested state legislative primaries in 2022 were prohibited from participation. Again, they weren't prohibited from participation. They could participate just fine in the Democrat Party primary. Quote, in 181 of those 590 contested federal and state primaries, disallowed voters were entirely blocked from a choice in who represents them because the primaries decided who won the office, either directly or with an uncontested general election, according to a Lee Enterprises analysis. Again, they weren't barred from participating. Not my fault if you're a Democrat in a supermajority Republican state. And if you want to participate in the primary election, then in Wyoming, you now have to register before the filing deadline. It's not that difficult, my friends. But evidently, it is difficult to understand for the Pravda on the Platte. It continues, that's almost 1 in 3 districts where excluded, and the language is probably what fires me up more than anything, my friends, because words mean things.
2 plus 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words mean things. We have to we have to get back to a place where we're all speaking the same language, because right now we're not. This article in the Pravda on the Platte is using, words like excluded. Excluded means you're not able to participate at all in any primary election. You're not excluded from the Republican primary if you're a Democrat. You made that choice to be a member of the Democrat Party, and as such, you don't have any reason to participate in the Republican Party. Oh, as you can tell, my friends, I probably need to take a break and go get a roll of duct tape. The article continues. Jeremy Gruber, a lawyer and senior vice president of Open Primaries, a national advocacy group. And by the way, an open primary, that would be anybody can vote in any primary election. In other words, that's one step away from ranked choice voting. Now, ranked choice voting is a different setup, but everybody gets to participate. There's no differences between Republicans and Democrats, which is the direction that a lot of these politicians want to go. They want to blur the lines between ideology because, of course, the ideology of Washington, D.C. is primarily all the same. Most people are a member of the deep state, and it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You still act like Democrats. In the Wyoming legislature, this is a great example. There are 31 Republicans in the House of Representatives that vote with the Democrats an average of 85% of the time. 85% in this past 2023 legislative session. They, by all accounts, are not Republicans, even though they are registered as ones. The reason why they joined the Republican Party is so that they could win elections, even though they don't believe in half the things. Actually, most of them don't believe in 3/4 of the things that Republicans do. The only reason that they register as Republicans is so that they can win an election. So the argument in Wyoming is, well, everybody's a Republican anyway. We should just have an open primary. No, the solution is to have a closed primary that therefore strengthens both parties. If you have a closed primary, there's no reason for a Democrat to run as a Republican. They should just be honest with themselves and run as a Democrat. It really, historically, has not been that long since we had a Democrat governor in Mike Sullivan. Wyoming has had several Democrat governors over its history. And the only reason why we've shifted away from that, I think it's twofold. First of all, the people of Wyoming have become increasingly more conservative, and so they tend to vote Republican instead of with the Democrats. Second, we've watched the Democrat Party membership decline steadily over the past probably 30 years. Most people join the Republican Party because politicians know that the vast amount of people that live in Wyoming are conservative. So if you're going to win an election from them, you have to be a Republican. But the truth is, if you strengthen primary election rules, that is, you have closed primaries, it helps both parties. That is, people who ideologically don't agree with the Republican Party platform. And by the way, it's platform. It's not platforms. There are planks in the platform. There are not platforms in the platform. It drives me absolutely bonkers every time I hear that. But the point being, my friends, is that we absolutely should have a closed primary. There's no reason why we don't. And if we had a closed primary, it would absolutely strengthen both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. So then there's an argument, why would we want a strong Democratic Party? For a couple of reasons. First of all, it would get Democrats out of the Republican Party. If there is a viable reason for them to be honest with their constituents and say that I'm a Democrat, it would help. It would strengthen both of the parties. Secondly, it would keep Republicans, and I don't know how better to explain this. It would keep the redcoats out of the Republican Party. Now, the problem is, again, that most people that live in Wyoming are conservative. Most of us really are. There's only a couple of reasons why we would choose to live in a place where it snows 9 months out of the year. And that's because we want to be left alone, because we agree that the government that governs best governs least. We want the government to stay out of our lives, which is why we moved to this barren place. And actually, it's not really all that barren, but we should probably tell everybody from California and New York that it is. Anyway, closed primaries would help both parties. And legally speaking, that's what we have. Now, the honest solution to all of this, and this is one that our pal Joey Carenti has pushed for a very, very long time, is to make some changes to Title 22. A lot of changes, and get the legislature out of the business of monkeying with the primary system and political parties. There are several statutes that regulate, and by the way, the only two private corporations in the state of Wyoming that are regulated by the legislature or that are run by the legislature are political parties. The Republican Party and the Democrat Party are private corporations, and they are the only two in the state that the legislature gets to create rule, basically manages. Every single year in the legislative session, there's a law to further manipulate political parties. There's one this year by Nancy Case. That was to force political parties to use proportional representation at their state central committee meetings. Yeah, imagine that. The legislature telling a private corporation how they have to run their, for lack of a better term, their board meeting. Absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, you've got this article in the Pravda on the Platte. First of all, absolutely misleading you about how primary elections are set up and how they ought to be run. Secondly, out and out lying to you that voters are excluded from the primary process because we have closed primaries. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that the Pravda put this on the front page of their website this morning just speaks to how absolutely I want to use the word sinister, but sinister kind of implies that you're in some way relevant, which the Pravda on the Platte has made themselves irrelevant recently. And the only reason that I'm on this article this morning is it's the first one that I saw that really irritated me. So anyway, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have closed primaries. We should strengthen that system. We should get the legislature out of Title 22. And I'm sure if you listen to Joey's program, Just Blame Joey, at least once a week, he's talking about the problems with Title 22. Title 22 in Wyoming statutes is the one that controls elections. There's a lot of problems with it, and the real solution is to get the legislature completely out of the political party business and allow political parties to run their primaries as they are intended, to make it just an election to select the party's nominee. It's not that hard, my friends. So for the sake of protecting my head and preventing it from exploding, let's move on. There's a great op-ed in the Cowboy by Dave Simpson. Dave Simpson is probably one of the only conservative columnists regular columnists at the Cowboy. I've never met the guy, but I like a lot of his writing, and he's got a new op-ed out this morning that's entitled, "So We're Extreme. Are You Kidding Me?" And I quote, "When our Democrat friends call us extreme, I'm reminded of that famous playoffs rant by football coach Jim Mora in 2001. After a humiliating loss in which young quarterback Peyton Manning racked up 5 turnovers, a reporter asked Mora if his Indianapolis Colts could still make the playoffs. Playoffs? Mora shouted incredulously. You talking about playoffs? Are you kidding me? Now, substitute extreme, the word extreme, for the word playoffs. And that's how people like us feel when some very extreme people call us extreme. Let's take a look at the real extremism in these days. I say, and this is Dave Simpson talking here, I say running up $34 trillion in debt is extreme, and it's bipartisan extremism, with members of both parties mindlessly saddling future generations with crippling debt. Most Americans know how a checkbook works, but not, apparently, our federal government. At least Republicans feel sheepish about it. Democrats are mostly okay with it, and we're called extreme for asking how long this can go on. I particularly like this next part, my friends. I say it's extreme in a conservative state like Wyoming for a drag queen seminar to be held recently in the Education Auditorium at the University of Wyoming. I'm also outraged at drag queens shaking their junk in front of little kids in parks and public facilities. I call that extreme. Now, the story he's referring to there was broke by Cowboy State Politics. It was an undercover investigation into the University of Wyoming sponsoring drag queen training seminars, and I've got the video to prove it. It's just as shocking as it sounds. It was probably a 2-month-long investigation. I've got undercover video, audio. I confronted the president of the university, Ed Seidel, about it and showed him the video. It was actually, I was pretty proud of the investigation, but the mainstream media in Wyoming didn't pick it up at all. Dave Simpson was the only one that wrote about it. Let's continue. Boys in sororities, and liberals call us extreme. Genderqueer in school libraries, that's the hill that they want to make their stand on? Really? When even the author says it wasn't written for kids. We hear plenty about far-right extremists, but we never hear about far-left extremists. I say throwing open our southern border is the very definition of extreme. We've taken in millions of illegal aliens, given them cell phones, plane or bus tickets to wherever they want to go, and as much as $5,000 in spending money on their credit cards. May get free health care, too. And we're the extremists. Our clueless big city neighbors who once sang the praises of sanctuary cities are now screaming like mashed cats over the cost of dealing with illegal immigrants. People were intense in Chicago's freezing temperatures last week, sleeping on cots at O'Hare Airport, and the city was putting them on idling buses to keep them from freezing. Diesel buses, not electric buses, which are harder to heat. And yet, those mayors blame Republicans instead of our obvious president, who caused this mess. Pretty extreme. The state of Maine is considering legislation to become a gender-affirming health care haven, protecting youngsters who want to switch genders and not tell mom and dad about it. Doesn't government taking over the role of parents strike you as extreme? What about late-term abortions? Maybe it's the grandpa in me, but that strikes me as awfully damned extreme. Banning Donald Trump from election ballots. To quote Jim Mora, "Are you kidding me?" 4 indictments and 91 separate charges against a former president of the United States. The first time an ex-president has been charged, and they are calling us extreme? Our liberal friends always seem to go too far, my friends. A few determined Republicans try to rein in a crazy deficit spending spree in Washington, but Democrats and the media call them dangerous extremists. Insolvency doesn't scare Democrats, but the thought of a government shutdown, in which everyone eventually gets paid, by the way, strikes terror in their progressive hearts. And we're the extremists. The state of Texas tries to stem the tidal wave of immigrants attempting to do the job that Joe Biden refuses to do. Biden responds by suing Texas for putting floating barriers in the Rio Grande, shipping containers along our shore, razor wire atop those containers, and closing a park to block access. It's one thing to not fix the problem you've created. It's another whole realm of insanity to sue people trying to solve a problem that you created. And yet, we are the ones who are supposedly extreme, making us energy dependent on nutty foreign countries that hate us, turning our campuses into far-left indoctrination camps, jamming electric vehicles down our throats with no idea where the electricity comes from. It's the full-court press of extremism from our determined Democrat friends, and they have the gall to call us extreme. My first editor over in Laramie had a word for this. Horse feathers. Dave Simpson is absolutely right. The very people that are calling us extremists are the ones that think it's okay to chop off the body parts of little children. They think that it's okay to allow the University of Wyoming to train drag queens using your taxpayer dollars. They think it's okay to have pornography in schools that is no different than Penthouse Letters, a magazine, by the way, you cannot get in a library. And yet, we are the extreme ones. We're the ones that are saying $34 trillion in debt is a lot. And yet, we're the extreme ones. The list goes on and on, my friends, but Dave Simpson's point is well taken. We are not the extreme ones, my friends. It is those folks on the left side, either left coast of the country, and by the way, in the leftist Wyoming legislature that are the extreme ones. The extreme people that refuse to say that killing babies is wrong. Because that's what most of them, let's just be honest about the policies that they want to put in place. They want abortion legal in Wyoming and in the United States. And let's be honest about what abortion is. It's killing babies. That's what it is by definition. So the people that say, maybe killing babies is wrong, well, they're the extremists. Absolutely ridiculous, my friends. Now remember, Try to figure this one out for me. When is the last time you saw Leo Trotsky Wolfson, by the way, and the reason why I use him as an example, because it's perfect, in article after article, he comes up with new and inventive ways to refer to the conservatives in the legislature as the right-wing extremists, the extreme conservatives, over and over in new, creative, and inventive ways. But have you ever seen him once write the words left-wing extremists, leftist Republicans, liberal Republicans, progressive Republicans? Nope, you've never seen him write those words because it's not in his lexicon. The only one that he possesses is to attack the right, to attack conservative values in every way that they possibly can. But yet, we are the extreme ones. Speaking of extreme, Dave Simpson mentioned this in his op-ed. And maybe you saw this yesterday, but Texas has decided that it is going to defy the federal government and, consequently, the Supreme Court. Now, I have some thoughts on this, but I want to just tell you what's going on, and then we're going to talk about the choice that Texas has made. This is from Breitbart News this morning, and I quote, "The Texas Military Department says it will continue to hold the line in Shelby Park in their efforts to deter and prevent unlawful entry into the state of Texas. Under Operation Lone Star orders from Governor Greg Abbott, the Texas National Guard's actions continue despite a second demand letter from the Department of Homeland Security to release control of the park seized by the state earlier this month. Governor Abbott pledged to continue deploying razor wire along the Rio Grande border with Mexico. Quote, "We remain resolute in our actions to secure our border, preserve our rule of law, and protect the sovereignty of our state," officials wrote in a post on X. Shortly after, DHS officials issued a second letter to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton demanding access to Shelby Park in Eagle Pass. A defiant Governor Abbott posted, "We will continue to deploy this razor wire to repel illegal immigration." On Monday, the United States Supreme Court reversed a temporary restraining order by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, effectively allowing U.S. Border Patrol agents to cut or remove razor wire installed by the Texas Military Department along the banks of the Rio Grande. Shortly after, Governor Abbott announced, "This is not over. Texas's razor wire is an effective deterrent to the illegal crossings Biden encourages." So, I have some thoughts on this whole thing. The Constitution tasks the federal government with protecting our borders. It's mentioned several times, and in Governor Greg Abbott's press release that he sent out yesterday, he notes several places in the Constitution where that is the federal government's duty to protect the borders. If you don't have borders, you don't have a state. You don't have state sovereignty if you're not protecting the borders around your country. But my problem comes in with the Supreme Court. Now, we have three co-equal branches of government. Right, wrong, or indifferent, the Constitution sets our government up in three different departments. There's legislative, executive, and there's the judicial, and they all have equal powers. Well, the judiciary has just said that the Biden administration can cut the razor wire along the southern border. And Texas is saying, nope, we're going to defy the Supreme Court. This one's a tough one because we all know that the Biden administration has absolutely allowed open borders along the Texas border between Mexico and the state. We all know that the Biden administration is in favor of throwing that border door wide open. But if we defy the Supreme Court, it makes us no different than the left. The situation one example of what I'm referring to is Biden's absolute ignoring the Supreme Court's order for him to stop his student loan debt forgiveness program. Supreme Court said he couldn't do it. Biden just said, "No, I'm going to do it anyway." So if we defy the Supreme Court and we just openly ignore what the court says, we are no different than they are. And while I don't like the Supreme Court's ruling on this matter, I don't think that we can just on our own say that we're just going to ignore what the Supreme Court says. That's what the left does. Now, I don't know how to go about fixing this situation. One solution is to start winning elections, replace that idiot in the White House, and let's get somebody else in there that will do the job. My thinking is I'm all in favor of some mean tweets right now. Let's just get rid of the sleepy guy in the White House. But I don't think that openly defying the Supreme Court is a solution. So that begs the question. Some people listening to this might say, well, Dave, does that mean that you're not standing with Texas? Absolutely not. I think that Texas should do everything within the law to protect the borders of their state. So the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution. They end up saying what is the supreme law of the land. And right now, they have said that the federal government, the feds, the Homeland Security, whomever it is, can cut that razor wire. So we have to find another way around it. To just openly defy the Supreme Court rejects the mandates. And I understand this might be a gigantic constitutional crisis in that the Constitution says the federal government has to protect the borders, and yet the Supreme Court says, nope, we're going to cut the razor wire. But there has to be another way, and defying the Constitution is not the way to do it. So this is a big, difficult situation, the answer for which is to work within the law. And I understand that Texas went to court and tried to get their borders secure. But my point here is that we just can't blatantly ignore the Supreme Court. To do that makes us no better than the folks on the left. So that's my thoughts on the matter. On tomorrow's installment, on the Friday installment of Cowboy State Politics Live, I'm going to go into this in more detail. But it's a difficult situation, and I don't think that there's any one solution to it. But I do know this, that defying the Supreme Court is not a solution. So let's take a quick break, and then we're going to talk a little bit of economic news. You remember back in Christmas when everybody was telling us that, consumer spending is up. People are spending like they don't have a care in the world, that the economy is booming and everything was great. Turns out they weren't exactly telling you the truth, and I'll explain it after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, entertainment, and commentary than on Cowboy State Politics Live. You know, the program you're listening to right now. And frankly, why would you want to look anywhere else anyway? Let's be honest, it'd be pretty dumb to look anywhere else. And if you want to listen to my podcast, you can find it at cowboystatepolitics.com or anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. If your name is Sleepy Joe Biden and you can't remember if you put socks on this morning or not, well, I can't really help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president of the United States. And now... Welcome back to the program. David Iverson on Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better mix of news, commentary, and entertainment anywhere else. with great voices like Joey Carenti and his program, Just Blame Joey. That one comes up directly after this program. Ken Pendergraft with The Ramble Room. And we've got some new programs that are in the mix right now. We've got Wide Right Turn with Tom Kelly and Joey Carenti. It's an interesting take on politics, and it's an in-depth hour-long discussion. I encourage you to go listen to it. The fellas are doing a really nice job on it. Also, we've got The Hair Affair with Christine that's going to be making a debut on the Independence Network at some point. We're thinking sometime in February. But Christine, the lovely Christine, is firing up her podcast once again starting in February. And she's put out a new trailer to get you interested. Just take a listen to it.
Hey, 2024, this is Christine with The Hair Affair. We're just getting started for this year, and I have got some great interviews lined up for you to hear, so stay tuned for February, and we'll get the show rolling again. Remember, it's not always about the hair.
Now, if you're not familiar with The Hair Affair with Christine, you can go to Podbean and just search for The Hair Affair with Christine. I'll put a link at cowboystatepolitics.com. And also, I think I've shared a couple of Christine's posts on my Facebook page. But any network has to have some programming that's not exactly related to politics. And if you haven't, and that's Christine's program. We all have to go get haircuts. And if you want some insight into what's going on in the beauty industry, Christine's got it. She already has a couple of interviews with some pretty big names in the beauty industry already in the can and ready to release. And so we'll give you more updates later on when we figure out where exactly in our schedule that Christine's show is going to be. But go check it out. She's got a number of programs from last year up there. All of them are super interesting. So go check out our Facebook page, The Hair Affair with Christine, and you'll find out everything about it. It's going to be a great program. Now, before Christmas, and actually during Christmas too, we were all told that the economy is booming and that people are spending at a breakneck pace and everything is just holly jolly with the economy. In fact, well, maybe this will jog your memory a little bit. This is what we were told.
Blue over the economy and other issues, they do plan to spend heartily this Christmas season. Steve Leisman joins us right now with the results of the latest All-America Economic Survey. And Steve, they are running out of days to do it.
Yeah, it's time to shop. That's right, Becky. But the CNBC All-America Economic Survey pointing to a green and a blue Christmas spending season. Green because Americans say they're going to spend more. Blue because they are decidedly downbeat on the economy.
Holiday shoppers jammed the nation's malls today. Cash registers are jingling, and CBS's Joy Benedict found consumers' moods are merry and bright.
Consumer sentiment soared 13% this month.
People are seeing some opportunities now to retain some of their money.
That's a positive sign after high inflation hurt American pocketbooks.
Consumer spending is still going strong. U.S. retail sales rebounded in October.
But one estimate sees holiday spending poised to surge to its highest level ever. PwC releasing its 2023 holiday outlook, which shows almost 40% of consumers plan to spend more this year than they did last year.
So everything was rainbows and lollipops and Santa Claus was in every store and Americans were just spending like their lives depended upon it. The truth is, though, that none of that really happened. Consumers did not increase their holiday spending. From ZeroHedge.com. National economic activity unexpectedly declined in September, according to the Chicago Federal Reserve. And I quote, against expectations of a small rise from 0.03 to 0.06, the Chicago Fed's National Activity Index, which draws on 85 different economic indicators, tumbled 0.15 in December. 2023 ends with 8 of the last 12 months in negative territory. 48 out of 85 inputs made a negative contribution, with all major subcategories weaker than before. Production and income was down 0.06. Employment was down 0.06. Personal consumption was actually up 1/100 of a point, and sales and orders were down 0.04. This indicates below-trend growth in the national economy and a sign of easing pressures on future inflation. Now, the truth is that consumers probably did spend a little bit more this past holiday season, but not for the reasons that all of these so-called experts are claiming. Everything costs more because of rampant inflation. So consumers probably bought fewer things, but it cost them more, which is just artificially inflated the numbers during December. But even so, this report from ZeroHedge.com shows you that none of that was true, that the economy was not booming in December like all these experts said it would. When inflation is rampant, people spend less because their essentials, food, utilities, housing, gas, all of those things cost more and they take up a larger percentage of the budget. So consumers don't actually spend more. There's no reason to assume that they would. So all of this stuff you heard around the holiday season that we were all spending a whole crap load of money, none of it was really true. In fact, we were probably buying less. It just cost us more. So my point being, my friends, that don't believe what all these experts are telling you, that the economy is rocking and Build Back Better is being, and yeah, none of that is true. It's all of a load of bullcrap. Just like all of this push for electric vehicles. They're all the rage now. Well, I mean, electric things, electric lawnmowers, that one kills me. I have to tell you, this is an argument that the lovely Christine and I, or a disagreement, not an argument, we're having. She thinks that an electric lawnmower is fantastic. I disagree because I can't even finish the front yard without stopping and taking a break and letting that battery charge up again. But according to the chairman of Toyota, we have to let the market decide. Imagine that! An executive that believes in free market economics. From the blaze, EVs will never dominate the global market. And I quote, the chairman of car manufacturer Toyota continued his push against electric vehicles in favor of hybrid vehicles and claimed that EVs will never have a majority share in the global market. Toyota chairman Akio Toyota's remarks published on the Toyota website echoed previous comments he made by the executive, in which he stated that there is a better path to reducing carbon than the enforcement of electric vehicles. Notice the terminology he used there, the enforcement of electric vehicles. Quote, no matter how much progress EVs make, I think they will still only have about 30% of the market share. Then the remaining 70% will be hybrid vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, hydrogen engines, and gas-powered motors. Gasoline engine cars will definitely remain. There is something that customers and the market will decide, not regulatory values or political power. Toyota previously stated that people were finally seeing reality regarding the EV market. He added that there were many ways to climb the mountain that is achieving carbon neutrality. Now, see, clearly this guy believes in climate change. However, he's at least clear-headed about the whole thing, that he uses that thing between his ears and comes to the conclusion that the rest of us have, that EVs don't work, the technology's not there, and unless you have 15 hours to waste for your trip from Cheyenne to Casper, they're not going to get the job done. Now, I've heard a lot of people raving about hybrid vehicles, and to me, that kind of makes sense a little bit, that you have a gas motor that is or you have an electric motor that's augmented by a gas motor, either way you want to put it. I see absolutely no problem with that. And if I had to commute, for 30 minutes or an hour one way to work, a lot of people that work in Cheyenne commute from Colorado or from even Wheatland. So to me, that makes sense. That you've got an electric motor, and once the battery runs down, the gas engine kicks in, charges the electric motor while you're driving. Sounds like a perfect mix to me. But you have to let the market decide. If you try to push through mandates, like the federal government is doing right now, the only thing it does is impedes the growth of the market, because you get people resistant to newer technologies. Just think about all the new technologies that that have come out in just the past 10 years alone. The good products floated to the top. The bad products floated to the bottom. Anybody ever have a laser disc when they came out? This is a classic example. Laser discs. I remember when those were all the rage. In fact, when I was in high school in Buffalo, the day we got to use the laser disc player to watch the Civil War documentary was fantastic. But they cost too much, and the market and they didn't have a good market share, and people didn't like them. And then they went the day of the dodo bird. Now, I'm a computer junkie. There's lots of examples with computer tech of where free market economics took care of a substandard product. One of those was zip drives. At the time, it was difficult to move data around without multiple disks. Sometimes you had to carry around a giant stack of those floppy disks with an entire program on them. Or when CD-ROMs came out, hey man, that was all the rage. And then zip drives came out where you could move 100 megabytes worth of data from computer to computer. Great, right? Well, unfortunately, for the Zip 100 company, USB drives came out, which had a much higher capacity. They were smaller. You didn't have to buy an extra drive to go in your computer. Oh, and then there was the LS120 drive. They came out with that company came out with that product to eclipse the Zip 100 drives. And they didn't stick around for more than 5 years because the technological advances at the time exceeded the existing technology. And so those companies went by the wayside. The free market took over. And that's exactly what has to happen with EVs. Right now, the technology does not exist to make them an effective vehicle for you to buy. And I know a lot of people own electric vehicles driving around the Northeast Wyoming. I see a lot of Teslas, but try driving over the mountain in one of those things. Try getting from Cheyenne to Casper, or frankly, from Cheyenne to Buffalo for that matter. All of that is uphill, even though you don't really realize it. So you have to let the free market take over. And according to the Toyota chairman, the free market is going to dictate what's going to happen with all of these EVs. And it doesn't matter what the federal government does, it's not going to work. You'll have to either push federal mandates and spend a whole bunch of taxpayers' money to make it effective, or they're just going to fail. A big example of that right now is all these stupid windmills that you see everywhere. The only way those things are profitable is with government subsidies. Once the subsidies run out, they're a loser. In fact, some of those windmills consume more electricity than they actually produce. And the simple reason for that is they're not running all of the time. A lot of the wind, and one of the places you see a lot of those is between Gillette and Douglas and on Highway 59. And you'll see windmills all over the place, but it's very rare that you drive through there and all of them are running at the same time. And that's simply because the wind in Wyoming is not constant. A lot of times you'll get gusts of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and the windmills just can't handle it. So they're not running all the time, but the electronics in all of them are running all of the time. All of the measurement and telemetry and all of those things in there, they have to have power constantly. So even if the thing isn't running, they're still consuming energy. And add in that they're not profitable past the government subsidies means there's no reason why you should put them up. There's no reason why a private company would go into business putting up these dumb windmills if they weren't getting government subsidies, because you can't make money on them. A good example of that is another article from The Blaze. And we saw a push a couple months ago, and I've got an article here that we'll touch on right after this one about the town of Jackson. But several months ago, there was a push for cities to buy EV buses. From The Blaze, we're pressing pause on EVs. City's $5 million electric bus fleet breaks down. And I quote, Asheville, North Carolina is looking to reinvest in biodiesel-powered buses after investing millions of dollars in an electric fleet that is only partly operable. Cities across America are starting to regret their massive electric bus investments as they continue to pour funds into costly, time-consuming repairs Asheville purchased 5 Proterra electric buses in 2018. And remember that name. It's important. Well, important for our next story anyway. Proterra buses in 2018 for $5 million. Since then, the city has spent more than $200,000 to build vehicle chargers. Additionally, Asheville spends $118,000 annually for the contract to lease the bus's batteries and another $45,481 to charge the vehicles, according to Asheville's interim transportation director, Jessica Morris. Quote, if you added that all together, I think probably $900,000 to $1 million is what each one cost. And since then, we've had to invest additional money into maintaining them and fixing them, she added. Only 2 of the 5 EV buses are currently operating, while the other 3 are out of service while awaiting repairs. The city reported that the faulty buses have had several software and mechanical issues since they were delivered. One of the buses has been parked since July because the city cannot obtain a manufacturer's replacement for a broken door. Quote, we haven't been able to get new doors, Morris explained. There's no third party that makes a door, and so we'd have to get custom-made doors. Morris noted that maintenance costs, including replacing traction drive controls on all 5 buses, have cost the city an additional $251,000. According to maintenance director John McDaniel, several EV buses have needed new power inverters, which cost $14,000 a year. Proterra filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in August after receiving, get this, $10 million in COVID relief loans from the Paycheck Protection Program in 2020, which were ultimately forgiven. The EV company, which President Biden has praised, also received other government incentives and support. Quote, since June of 2023, we've had numerous issues with vehicles out of service for weeks and months, Morris added. So kind of makes you remember, you guys remember the Solyndra controversy? Yeah, Solyndra was the big solar panel maker that the Biden or the Barack Obama administration gave hundreds of millions of dollars to, and they never produced a single electric panel or solar panel. The government's push to subsidize all of these renewable energy companies is the biggest boondoggle that I've ever heard of. Just let the free market decide, which is exactly what the town of Jackson should have done. Now, maybe you heard about this article, maybe you didn't, but it was back in October of 2023. And it's a study put out by the Institute for Energy Research. And get this, none of Jackson Hole's 8 electric buses are working. And this was last October. Quote, a transit system run by the town of Jackson and Teton County, Wyoming, replaced its diesel buses with electric, but none of the 8 electric buses in its fleet are running. And this was back in October. And the company that made them has gone bankrupt. Teton County has the highest concentration of wealth of any county in the United States, with an average per capita income of more than $318,000. The county commission turned its nose up at buying natural gas vehicles, despite a readily available local natural gas supply. Instead, it bought electric buses from Proterra, a California company that had received massive federal subsidies. The green buses have been breaking down in cold weather, which is most of the time in the mountains of Wyoming, and heating needs sapped the energy from the batteries. In winter, the electric buses had to return to the depot at midday to recharge and were replaced by either another electric bus, if one was available, or a diesel-powered bus. Many of the malfunctioning buses have been abandoned, and so the town's transit system is relying on its diesel fleet of 31 buses. I wonder why. Last week, I brought you the story of a big, gigantic Tesla charging station in Chicago that had become an electric vehicle graveyard because it was so darn cold in Chicago that the batteries wouldn't charge. So which rocket scientist in Jackson decided to purchase electric buses in Jackson? You know, the place where it starts snowing in September and doesn't stop until probably May. Genius, my friends. Now, the folks in Jackson, they are, I mean, the Jackson is pretty much run by a bunch of liberals, so it's no guess why they purchased electric vehicles in the first place. But absolutely idiotic, and these people ought to pull their heads up out of out of the green energy muck that they've been bathing in and come back to the real world. Let the free market decide. They absolutely should. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll get back to the program. Apparently, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but expecting a response from an email that you've sent is now racist, along with everything else. But we'll do that after an extraordinary profit timeout. In case you haven't noticed, it's still cold outside. It's still January, we're still in the middle of winter, and February is still coming. And you are going to have to shovel the walk the entire time. One of the most important things to remember when shoveling the walk for the missus is to make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm. And the best way that you can do that is with a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. The Buffalo Wool Company makes the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And trust me, you are not going to be disappointed. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Well, if you hadn't noticed, or if you weren't listening at the beginning of the program, that was the phone call that I was expecting, and I knew it was going to come sometime during the program, so that's taken care of. All I can tell you right now is we've got a big interview that I'm probably going to do later on today. I'm not going to tell you who it's with quite yet. Want to kind of make it a surprise. But I will tell you that if you pay attention to politics, like most Cowboy State Politics listeners do, there's been a bill that a lot of people are kind of irritated about. And having done a little bit of research on it last night, I can tell you that I think most people are kind of confused about what the bill actually does. And, perhaps rightfully so, perhaps not. But I've got a hold of the one person that we need to talk to. And, it's one of the problems with the mainstream media is they write an article about a vote or a bill or first, they rarely do any research into it. Most of the time, they don't even read it. They just go on whatever other people are saying about the bill and assume that that's the facts. And so first thing we do at the Independence Network and at Cowboy State Politics is we do our research. And we give you facts and data to back it up and on the important stuff to provide you the materials for which you can do your own research. So this is a case where I would say that a lot of people in the media, in political parties, and perhaps some of the House caucuses have kind of missed the boat on it. And so I've tracked down the one person that everybody's all irritated about, and I'm probably going to do an interview with her later on today or sometime tomorrow. So a little foreshadowing of what might happen is tomorrow, we may have to preempt the program a little bit with a replay while I do the interview. Or, we're going to have to kind of keep the schedule open a little bit because this is a big interview and I don't want you to miss it. And, sometimes when you're dealing with super busy people, you have to change your schedule around to what they want to do. So keep your ears peeled on that, and we'll have a pretty big interview coming up on Cowboy State Politics. So just to kind of give you a little fair warning, foreshadowing there. So I'm pretty sure you didn't know this, but if you're expecting a response from an email, that's now racist. And the Trump prosecutor had suggested that in leaked emails from the Washington Free Beacon. everything is racist now, my friends. It's absolutely infuriating. Maybe infuriating is not the right word. Maddening. Maddening is definitely the right word. Everything is racist. And the reason why that term is used, remember, words mean things, and we have to be accurate about the language that we use. The left are masters at goofing up language and making you believe things that aren't exactly true. So the biggest reason why the left uses the term racist is it carries such negative connotations with it that for most people, you don't have to even provide any proof. You can just say that person over there is a racist, and then the burden of proof is on them to prove that they are not a racist. It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's the reason why that term is used all of the time. So the district attorney prosecuting former President Donald Trump in Georgia suggested in an email exchange earlier this month that racism was at play when one of Trump's attorneys pressed her team for a response to his emails. Quote, Trump defense lawyer Stephen Sadow requested responses from District Attorney Fannie Willis's team to a series of emails that he had sent, according to the New York Times, which obtained portions of the conversation. After Executive District Attorney Daisha Young replied by suggesting the prosecuting attorneys were being treated with disrespect because they're black. Willis sent an email to Sadow affirming Young's charge. Quote, in the legal community and the world at large, some people will never be able to respect African Americans and or women as their equal and counterpart. That is the burden that you do not experience. Further, some are so used to doing it while they're not even aware they are doing it, while others are intentional in their continued disrespect. Willis, who is black, said in an email to Sadow and Trump's other defense attorneys, most of whom are white men. The conversation began January 5th when Sadow told the prosecution, quote, for the life of me, I cannot understand why you refuse to respond to the series of emails below. Young, who is black, responded to him 5 days later saying that she and Willis, quote, are both aware, especially as an African-American woman, some find it difficult to treat us respectfully. Quote, over the last month, the emails of some of you have been disrespectful and condescending, lacking both professionalism and decorum, adding that she did not respond to some of the emails because they were disrespectful. Sadow then said that alleging racism was, quote, offensive, uncalled for, and untrue, and that Young's lack of communication suggests a degree of haughtiness. That was when Willis made this statement, quote, now you know I cannot be bullied, Willis said in her response to Sadow. As you are aware, she added, I have now experienced some of the most powerful people in the country call me everything but a child of God. But yet here I am, and my team and I still stand tall, pursuing justice. Willis, of course, is facing controversy after a court filing accused her of engaging in an improper relationship with Nathan Wade, a special prosecutor she appointed to lead a racketeering case against the former president. In a Sunday speech, she suggested that racism had a part in the allegations against her and Wade, who is also black. You see, so if you are accused of misdeeds and an alleged affair, well, then all you have to do is claim that everybody else is being racist, and that'll get you out of it. Yeah, right. Absolutely ridiculous. That whole thing, I don't know exactly what to say about it because I've read the Georgia indictment. It's honestly, if you want some crazy reading, you should go read that whole indictment. She accuses people of engaging in a conspiracy because they returned a phone call. Absolutely absurd, my friends. So if you want some light reading, go check it out. You'll be pretty interested in it. From the Epic Times, Buzz Aldrin confirmed UFO sighting in a new TV show. but it wasn't aliens. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, said he spotted a UFO while on the Apollo 11 mission. The makers of Sharknado are coming out with a new show titled, quote, Aliens on the Moon, end quote, and Aldrin confirming the sighting when interviewed for the program. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, said he spotted a UFO while on the Apollo 11 mission. He first made the comments publicly in a 2005 interview with the Science Channel, though afterward he said he was quoted out of context. Now, the makers of Sharknado, which, thank God I've never watched that movie, and I hope you haven't either. But some people that I know, they're into weird, crazy monster flicks, watched it and said it was absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, those people are coming out with a new show titled Aliens on the Moon. And Entertainment Tonight reported Wednesday that Aldrin confirmed the sighting when interviewed for the program. The program looks at additional evidence that extraterrestrials may have structures built on the moon. Aldrin also appeared on Reddit last week to answer questions from users on the social media site. He was asked about his reported UFO sighting, and his response reads as follows. Perhaps we need more X-Files music for this. Quote, on Apollo 11, en route to the moon, I observed a light out of the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. There were many explanations of what that could be, other than another spacecraft from another country or another world. It was either the rocket we had separated from or the four panels that moved away when we extracted the lander from the rocket and when we were nose to nose with the two spacecraft. So, in the close vicinity moving away were four panels, and I feel absolutely convinced that we were looking at the sun reflected off of one of those panels. Which one? I don't know. So technically, the definition could be unidentified. We well understood exactly what it was, and when we returned, we debriefed and explained exactly what we had observed. And I felt that this had been distributed to the outside world, the outside audience, but apparently it wasn't. So many years later, I had time in an interview to disclose these observations on another country's television network. And the UFO people in the United States were very, very, very angry with me that I had not given them the information. Quote, it was not an alien. Extraordinary observations require extraordinary evidence. That's what Carl Sagan said. There may be aliens in our Milky Way galaxy, and there are billions of other galaxies. The probability is almost certain that there is life somewhere in space, but the distances involved in where some evidence of life may be, they may be hundreds of light years away. Some have said that NASA hasn't returned to the moon because it was warned off by aliens, and that Aldrin has probably been told not to disclose the truth. Aldrin said on Reddit that he thinks NASA shouldn't return to the moon because it's not the best use of resources. So there you go. You've probably heard, and I myself saw a headline that said, Buzz Aldrin says he saw UFOs and spoke to aliens during his trip on Apollo 11. Okay, I went back to get that article so I could talk to you about it on the program, but it had been deleted, mostly because of this. So here's my thoughts on aliens. The universe is an extraordinarily big place, and it's so vast that we don't even possess the technology to understand how big the universe is. We know that there are other planets. We've observed them with the Hubble Space Telescope and with the newest telescope that we've put up there. So if we are the only life in the universe, it seems like an awfully big waste of space. It is, in my mind, it is almost a certainty that there is life on other planets. The probabilities are just too big to ignore. Do I think that we've been visited by aliens? That one I'm not so sure of. But, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But like Carl Sagan said, with extraordinary revelations, it takes extraordinary evidence. And I don't think that here we go. Extraordinary observations require extraordinary evidence. And I don't think that we have that quite yet. Sorry to disappoint all the UFO fanatics that are planning their next vacation down to Roswell, but I just don't think that we're there quite yet. Now, one name that we haven't heard of in quite some time is BS artist Adam Schiff. Well, he's running in a very contested race with Steve Garvey, former baseball great, member of the Hall of Fame. Well, he's running against Adam Schiff in that congressional district, and he's actually given the BS artist a run for its money. Well, while on a 2024 presidential race dominates headlines, there are plenty of noteworthy happenings going on in congressional contests. Case in point, Steve Garvey just called Adam Schiff a liar over allegations that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government to rig the 2016 election. Quote, "I think you've been censured for lying," the former athlete said to Adam Schiff during a Monday night debate in Los Angeles. Quote, "And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Career politicians who are trying to determine who we are by race or by color, by gender," he continued. "They never listen. They have pre-arranged words to say." Schiff, who presided, of course, over Trump's first impeachment, snarked back that he was censured for standing up to a corrupt politician. Well, let's give a listen to that little exchange. And, I mean, it's pretty humorous, but we're talking about the liar-in-chief. Well, not the liar-in-chief, but one of the foremost liars in America, Adam Schiff. Here we go. Here's that exchange with Steve Garvey.
I think you've been censored for lying. I was censured for standing up to a corrupt president. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The same corrupt president Mr. Garvey's turn. Let him go. Or trying to determine who we are by race or by color or by gender. They never listen. They have prearranged words to say. And by the way, I would not vote for a federal ban on abortion. Let's make that clear right now.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
All right, we're going to. I'm going to insist on answering. All right. I was just called a liar by Mr. Garvey. Okay, 30 seconds. Mr. Garvey, I was censured for standing up to a corrupt president. And you know something? I would do it all over again. Because that corrupt president, that president who's been indicted with 91 felony counts, that president that you won't refuse to support, yeah, he's a danger, and I will stand up to him and Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan and any of those MAGA enablers of his in the Congress. The reason why our democracy is in trouble is because folks don't have the courage to stand up when they need to.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir, we're going to keep moving.
Let me just invoke my name.
All right, real quick,
sir. You lied to 300 million people. You can't take that back.
Adam Schiff absolutely lied to 300 million people over and over and over and over and over. Remember when he said he has incontrovertible evidence that Trump colluded with Russia? He repeated that lie in congressional testimony, all on TV interviews, all over the place, and he was never able to produce a single ounce of proof against the former president. Here he is on one of those television networks spouting one of his other lies. You'll be able to pick up on this one.
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son. And, you know, the idea that the president, that the White House counsel and others were made aware that Giuliani was being used by Russian intelligence and using Russian intelligence in the sense of meeting with an agent of the Kremlin and pushing out this Kremlin false narrative. The idea that they were knowing and still on the floor of the Senate during the impeachment trial, pushing this Kremlin narrative is pretty breathtaking. But I guess at this point we can't be shocked by anything this administration does, no matter how craven. But clearly the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin, and the president is only too happy to have Kremlin help in trying to amplify it.
Adam Schiff was basically the point man in this whole Russia collusion thing. Over and over and over, he went on TV claiming that he had absolute evidence of Trump's involvement in the whole thing. All of it was untrue. And yet here he is in a congressional debate with the guy who has a very good chance of beating him, even in California. lying once again. Now, there's one thing that I wanted to hit on. You know, I like Steve Garvey. As you know, I'm a baseball fanatic. But really gave me pause when he said he's not in favor of a ban for abortion. But there again, he is running in California, so that would probably be a death knell for his election. I get it. However, we've got to stick to principles, my friends. If you're going to sacrifice your principles, then you didn't believe in them in the first place. Also, I think if those actually are his principles, then I've got some questions about the former baseball great. But it was also not that long ago where Adam Schiff was caught, punked by a radio station trying to get dirt on Trump. It's absolutely hilarious, and since we're talking about Adam Schiff, I see no reason why we shouldn't play it. Remember this old gem?
She got compromising materials on Trump after their short relations.
Okay. And what's the nature of the compromise?
Well, there were pictures of naked Trump.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so Putin was made aware of the availability of the compromising material?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will be back in touch with you through our staff to make arrangements to obtain these materials for our committee and for the FBI. And I appreciate you reaching out to us.
And pictures of naked Trump. Oh, really? You've got those? I definitely want them. Adam Schiff is a goofball lie. We're a long ways from it, several months before the November general election. But those in Biden's camp are trying desperately to clean up all of the crappy things that he said. And, you know, they've got a big job ahead of them. So, for example,
we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by God. You know the thing. True international effort to pressure. I got hairy legs that turn.
I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom.
I just spoke at Dartmouth on healthcare at the medical school, or not. I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but the people from the medical school were at the. I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts. I'm not sure whether it was a medical school or where the hell I spoke, but it was on the campus.
True international effort to pressure.
Every time I hear that, it just cracks me up. Now, of course, all of those are just old person gaffes, where he can't string two sentences together and he gets confused and says really, really dumb stuff. Now, he's still doing that, saying really, really dumb stuff. The most recent one, let's see here we go. Listen to this.
Hello, Virginia. And the real governor, Terry McAuliffe.
Now, I thought election denial was a serious offense that should land you in a D.C. gulag, but not for the President of the United States. Well, that's his most recent flub or gaffe or lie or honest moment or whatever you want to call it. But that's the most recent one. However, his acolytes are trying to mop up for things that he said in the past. Now, let me give you another one. So there's a CNN ex-talking head. His name is Chris Cillizza. Now, he is taking a beating on social media over the claim that Biden never told coal miners to learn to code. Now that one at the time, that was during the Barack was in 2019, so it wasn't in the Obama administration, but he was, anybody who can go down 3,000 feet in a mine can sure as hell learn to program as well. Well, this ex-CNN talking head never suggested that workers in one profession could simply change jobs by learning to code. The conversation began with news of recent layoffs at a number of media outlets, including the Los Angeles Times, and a response posted via X by DeSantis' press secretary, Jeremy Redfern. Quote, "The LA Times is not having a good day, and I'm at peace with that." In context, Redfern has been on the receiving end of a number of media inquiries from the LA Times and other media outlets, many of which intentionally framed their pieces to attack his boss. But Cillizza didn't see things that way. Quote, "We will never get people who celebrate when other humans with families, mortgages, medical bills, etc. lose their jobs. Journalists did this with coal miners. So cry harder," one person replied, prompting Cillizza to respond. They didn't laugh, though, at all. Biden said it, and he didn't even say learn to code. Facts matter. Kind of like journalists cheering people getting laid off over COVID shots. Zero sympathy here, another replied to Cillizza. The journalists now need to hustle and get real jobs. Hey, maybe they can learn to code. Enjoy. Now, Cillizza, apparently unaware that Biden actually said those things. Now, admittedly, he didn't say learn to code, but he was just as insulting. Here is what Joe Biden said. Let's see here. Learn how to code. Here we go. Cut 6 or 7.
Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in the mine, sure and hell can learn how to program as well. Give me a break. Anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake.
Oh, for God's sake. Now, first of all, that Biden actually thinks that people that are still shoveling coal into furnaces, I'm sure that happens somewhere, but that's not coal mining. Secondly, how insulting to tell a bunch of coal miners to say, just go sit in front of a computer and learn how to code. You don't need to coal mine. But anyway, that absolutely happened, and this Cillizza idiot is taking a beating for it. The point with this story is that there are so many things that Joe Biden has said over the years that are extraordinarily incriminating. That my Biden gaffe reel, in fact, I've got 3 of them. All of them are around 3 minutes, and there's only a couple repeats in each one of them. My favorite, of course, is this. Oh, hold on a minute. Here, we'll play it again.
True international average of pressure.
That is almost as good as this one.
Oh, I think you got to stop and take a look at what you're doing here. I speak against this because it kind of reminds me of that fairy tale, Cinderella.
Ah, the Cinderella story that was the Biden administration. Didn't quite turn out so good for Biden's, but, we can only hope. Well, let's go ahead and take our last break, and then we're going to do a little bit of entertainment news and some sports news. We haven't done that for a while, so we'll do that after the break. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble-Roon, and of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson on Cowboy State Politics Live. Documented to be almost always right, almost 99% of the time. Executing host duties flawlessly, with talent given to me by God himself. I need to get one of those little gizmos that lets me do the little reverb when I say God himself. We all should be thankful for the gifts that we were given, and apparently my gift is to do this show, Cowboy State Politics, and inform all of you about what all these dirty politicians are doing. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I bring up during the course of a program. And, so if your name is, I don't know, Sleepy Joe Biden, and you can't figure out why you're sitting in the Oval Office, well, you can go to the Cowboy State Politics website and pull up an article, educate yourself, and find out exactly why you shouldn't be there. So a little bit of sports news. Now, it's been a while since we've talked any sports. I don't really do that too much on the program. And really, we're not in baseball season anymore. As you know, I am a baseball aficionado. In the Cowboy State Politics studio, I've got the baseball card display case with some of my treasures. None of them are really expensive, though I do have the Mickey Mantle card and a couple of other, kind of spendy ones. But I just like to look at them. I'm not one of those baseball fans that can rattle off statistics all the time. I mean, I can tell you who the greats were, and I know where to go find the information, but I'm not one of those statistic heads. And as I told you, I'm a new convert to the Texas Rangers baseball team, and that all came from a visit to Dallas. If you remember, last year, me and the lovely Christine took a little trip to Dallas to do a couple of things. One, to be a guest on Chad Prather's radio or television program at The Blaze. Had a great time visiting Mercury Radio Studios. I've got pictures of myself standing in Glenn Beck's studio. Fantastic. Anyway, after that, we went to a Texas Rangers baseball game, and there was not one iota of politics in that entire place. No pride flags, no politics whatsoever. We walked up to the beer cart or the beer stand or whatever, and I asked them what kind of fake beer they had, and the lady says, well, I've got Bud Zero. And I kind of grimaced and said, like, really? And she goes, come on, this is Texas Rangers Stadium. There's no politics here. Do you want a beer or not? And I was like, yeah, well, here, give me the beer. And, well, anyway, during the game, no politics whatsoever. And as it turns out, the Texas Rangers were the only Major League Baseball team to not have a Pride Night. And as the lovely Christine and I were sitting in the stands, I looked to her and I said, this game reminded me why I love baseball so much. And I absolutely do, my friends. And I became a Texas Rangers fan right then. And and I've never been the guy that roots for a team only when they're winning. When I was growing up, I was a Denver Bronco fan. So I understand losing. So it's not about that. It's not about them winning the World Series, although they did. And since we're talking baseball, I think I should play you a couple sound bites from their World Series win. Here's my man, Marcus Semien, knocking one out of the park. Check this one out.
The 0-1. Semien lines one deep to left center field. That ball is way back, and that ball is history. A two-run homer for Marcus Semien. It's 5-0 Rangers in the ninth. A blistering line drive that never came down in left center field.
That was a good night sitting in the studios through the whole World Series. I listened to all the games on the radio. It was very nostalgic for me. I loved every minute of it, including this one.
2 balls, 2 strikes. Spores kicks and fires. He struck him out looking. It's over. It's over. The Rangers have won the World Series. Ranger fans, you're not dreaming. The Rangers are the World Series champions.
Yeah, that was a good night sitting in the studio with Christine, hanging out, listening to the Texas Rangers win the World Series. So I'm obviously a baseball fan. And I used to be a football fan until all of that kneeling for the national anthem crap started. And I'll tell you what did it for me, what changed me from being a football fan. I've only watched 2 football games in the past. Oh, geez, I don't know. It was when all that kneeling stuff was going on. So I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago, whenever. But since then, I've only watched a couple of football games. And what did it for me is I thought, well, surely the Denver Broncos are not going to kneel for the national anthem. And I looked at the TV, and there they were, a whole bunch of them kneeling for the national anthem. And at that moment, I said, I'm done with football. I'm not going to watch another game. And I haven't. The only games I've watched have been either at my parents' house or with somebody else that wanted to watch a football game. But other than that, I have not chose to sit down and watch one. Well, there's a good reason for that, and my suspicions always get confirmed, my friends. I am right just about 99% of the time. Well, the NFL has continued to add fuel to my I don't want to call it a boycott because it's permanent. Boycotts tend to end. This one doesn't. But they continue to reinforce my decision never to willingly watch another football game. An article from, let's see here, this one was on Fox News, I think. NFL continues to add fuel to the divisive fire with incredibly ridiculous Night of Pride Super Bowl event. Yep, you heard that right. It's weak, my friends, just weak. This year's Super Bowl is being held in Las Vegas, and though the Super Bowl is always glorious, it's a little bit more special in 2024, with it being held in Sin City. So why is the NFL ruining it with a Night of Pride? That's right, my friends, you heard it correctly. The league is hosting their third Night of Pride event during Super Bowl week. And though I guess LGBTQ plus ZSPLMD, or whatever they're named today, and a City of Sin mix as well. I don't want them to have this one, not Vegas. This event is more for a boring city like Minneapolis, where the first Night of Pride event was held in 2018. In the official press release from the NFL, they say they're hosting this event with GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and that Smirnoff is sponsoring the social justice shindig, which is being held on February 7th. And I quote, "A Night of Pride with GLAAD is an evening of music, cocktails, and interview-style conversations with GLAAD, a nonprofit organization focused on LGBTQ plus ESPCLMND advocacy and cultural change," the league said. The NFL family and partners will gather to spotlight advances in the future of the LGBTQ plus LNOPXPZD inclusion in professional sports, as well as the NFL's commitment to, I can't say that long list again, LGBTQ former and current players, end quote. Why do we have to include your choice of who you go to bed with in everything, my friends? Why? Why can we not leave one little segment of our society alone, like sports? Well, it's because the people that run the NFL and the Major League Baseball and a whole bunch of them think that you have to be inundated with this gay agenda, this LGBTQ, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. It's all an agenda. And I know that I'm probably going to be attacked on social media when this hits for being insensitive. Well, I'm not being insensitive. I'm telling you the truth. There's no reason why who you go to bed with needs to be shoved down my throat. Frankly, I don't give a crap about it. What you do behind your doors is your business. So long as you're not involving a child in it, I don't care, and so long as you're not trying to shove it in my face. Do your own business in your own home. I couldn't care less of who you want to go to sleep with. But apparently, these LGBTQ advocates will not be satisfied until all of us join their ranks, which is why the NFL is insistent on doing all this. But my friends, normal, everyday Americans that live on Mount Normal, Wyoming, aren't buying into it. Most of them are not. You remember it was back in 1998, I think, and when there was a rally at the Lincoln Memorial where they said 1 in 10 is not enough. Recruit, recruit, recruit. That's the only way that they can get these advocates can expand their ranks is by recruiting, because of course people are produced by the heterosexual process of reproduction. That can't happen if you're gay. Sorry, not gonna work. Just doesn't work that way. But, that hasn't stopped them from pushing this agenda in every segment of our society. Perhaps you've seen on the news where there's this big controversy that the Barbie movie didn't get an Oscar. First of all, you're an idiot if you think that movie deserved an Oscar. Second, if you're advocating and arguing over it, it makes you even further an idiot. But only cultural Marxists and little girls believe that movie is entitled to an Oscar. And I quote, "The only people under the illusion that Barbies," and this is from the Federalist, The only people under the illusion that Barbie's director and lead actress are entitled to an Oscar are children and leftist zealots who measure art based on politics. To the shock and outrage of Ryan Gosling, the ladies on the View, and the diehard Barbie movie fans everywhere, Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig were snubbed Tuesday when the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announced this year's nominees. The consensus is that the patriarchy and sexism account for Robbie and Gerwig's exclusion from the Best Actress and Best Director categories, respectively. Supporting these actors are stars Ryan Gosling and America Ferrera, who themselves received nominations for their roles in the film, having publicly criticized the Academy's decision not. First of all, I can't even believe we're talking about this. This is where our society has gone, that we have to include everybody. Everybody gets a participation trophy, and perhaps that is where all this bullcrap started, that everyone is special. The truth is, not everyone is special, my friends. There are some people who are more talented than others. And at the point we started giving trophies for you being ordinary is where we said that everybody deserves recognition. That's just not true, my friends. Not everybody is equal, nor should they be. It's absolutely mind-numbing. And, the only reason I brought it up is I was like, really? We're arguing over this, that Barbie didn't get an Oscar? Ridiculous. Now, another piece of evidence that Americans aren't buying this whole LGBTQ XPZWD agenda is that Paramount is set to lay off hundreds across nearly all divisions in the latest Hollywood bloodbath. According to Paramount Global, the parent company of CBS, Paramount Pictures, Showtime, and numerous other media properties, is reportedly set to lay off hundreds of employees. The impending cuts represent the latest Hollywood bloodbath following layoffs at other corporations, Disney, NBC Universal, MGM Studios, and Universal Music Group. Hollywood is feeling the squeeze on multiple fronts. Households continue to cut the cord by the millions, while the advertising market is still in the doldrums. Okay, so this article is claiming that all of that is a result of advertising and people cutting the cord. I'm sure it's influenced partly by that, but the biggest reason why it's paramount and why this is why I brought this article up is that Paramount is one of the main networks that's pushing the LGBTQ plus agenda. I've told you several times about the Star Trek series Discovery. First season was great. Second season, every character on that thing, they were just pushing who they decided to go to bed with. It was absolutely disgusting. Well, that has continued across a lot of the shows that Paramount has produced, and that they've got to lay off hundreds of people serves them right. Americans are sick and tired of this agenda, and a lot of times I'm sick and tired of talking about it. Well, we've got about 5 minutes or 10 minutes left in the program. So Pelosi has come out and said that Trump has a cognitive disorder, that he should never step foot in the White House. And all of this stems from a slip of the tongue that Trump made while giving a speech at a rally. And he mistakenly said Nikki Haley when what he meant to say was Nancy Pelosi. So he says Nikki Haley in the speech, and I didn't grab the soundbite, but he says that Nikki Haley refused to accept National Guard troops on January 6th. And then he went into an explanation of why that was bad and how he's the one that offered troops, and all of that is absolutely true. Well, he meant Nancy Pelosi, and he didn't go back and correct himself. So now Pelosi is saying that he's got a cognitive disorder. And I quote from Breitbart, Representative Nancy Pelosi said Wednesday on TV news at 6 p.m. that former President Donald Trump has a cognitive disorder. At a campaign rally, said Nikki Haley, they destroyed all of the information, all the evidence, everything deleted, charge of security. So he actually said her name twice, spoke. I don't think there's any question there that that's absolutely the case. But there's no reason to assume that he has a cognitive disorder because of that. I don't know how you could get that conclusion out of there, but he did. And so it's Nancy Pelosi saying that Trump is the guy with the mental disorder and not this guy.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. True international suffrage of pressure. I got hairy legs that turn that.
I'm sorry, my friends. I just can't get enough of the Biden gaffe reel. It's incredible. It makes me laugh every single time. Well, actually, I misspoke earlier. We've only got about 2 minutes left in the program. This website, you got to keep updating it so that it gives you the correct time. But I want to end with this story, and it's from The Blaze. And I'm going to cover this in more detail on tomorrow's program because I think that it's really important. But the U.S. Army has promoted 10,000 troops who have not completed their required military training. Holy crap, my friends. Just the first paragraph or so. The U.S. Army has allegedly given promotions to 10,000 non-commissioned officers. These individuals have not completed required military education and training. Though 10,000 NCOs have remained in their promoted position, the U.S. Army initially promoted 52,000 NCOs in what the military branch characterized as a temporary pandemic-era policy. Military.com reported that the NCOs are supposed to be stripped of their promotion if they do not complete their required schooling within a year of promotion. But the Army does not want to demote frontline enlisted leaders all at once. Reports noted that the one-year deadline could have posed challenges to those who had trouble scheduling their schooling. There are limited slots for some occupations in the military, and long-term training rotations have made it hard for some units to send their troops to school. The shocking part about this, my friends, is that the military is promoting people who are not trained, who are not fully trained, I should say. Now, everybody who joins the military's got to go to boot camp. I never did. I never joined the military, but that's necessary. You cannot have military officers who do not have proper training. So I'm going to cover this in more detail on tomorrow's program. Well, we've come to the end of another busy broadcast day on the program. Went by really fast. Make sure that you tune in to Just Blame Joey, which comes on directly after Paul Harvey, about 11:04, 11:05. Also, don't miss the Hair Affair with Christine. She's got a trailer out. Go to Podbean, search for the Hair Affair with Christine. But that'll do it for now. From the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson.